The sky was overcast, and a light mist covered the landscape surrounding the old farm where Miguel had lived most of his life. Friends and family gathered in silence to pay their last respects to the farmer. The simplicity of the ceremony reflected Miguel's own life, modest, honest, and marked by dedication to the land and the animals he cared for. The small crowd surrounding the coffin wore expressions of respect and sadness. Miguel was known for his generosity and for how he helped those in need, even when it often came at personal sacrifice. He rarely boasted about his actions and preferred to maintain a humble and serene demeanor. For years, he tended to the farm with devotion, turning it into not just a place of work, but also a refuge for all who sought comfort. Among those present, many remembered Valente, the horse that had been Miguel's constant companion for so long. Valente was not just a work animal. He seemed to understand Miguel in a special way, as if he comprehended each of the farmer's concerns and hopes. It was common to see the two of them walking together across the fields, like old friends silently sharing the same thoughts. However, years before, Miguel had faced a difficult financial situation. The crops had suffered, and he found himself with no options to keep the farm. To settle debts that threatened to take everything he owned, Miguel made a painful decision to sell Valente. Losing the horse was a blow to him, as if he were giving away a part of himself. Valente was bought by a neighboring farmer, someone Miguel believed would treat him well, even though he knew the new owner did not share the same affection and respect he had for the horse. The funeral procession continued, and the expressions of those present reflected the depth of the absence Miguel left behind. Each person recalled a story, a gesture of kindness, a smile, or a piece of advice he had given at just the right moment. For many, the image of Miguel was intertwined with that of Valente, a symbol of friendship and loyalty that transcended any human bond. It was as if, by losing the horse, Miguel had also lost a vital part of his own essence. And now, with his departure, that feeling of loss intensified. With the farewell words spoken, a heavy silence settled over the group. The mist seemed to close in around the farm, enveloping the place in an atmosphere of longing and reverence as those present awaited the final moment of the ceremony. The memory of Valente lingered in the air among those who knew Miguel closely. The horse was not just an animal on the farm. He was an essential part of Miguel's story, a constant presence in his life during both good and bad times. Miguel had adopted him when he was still young, almost a colt, and since then, the two had maintained a bond that transcended any logical explanation. Valente was a dark-coated horse with a watchful and expressive gaze. In many ways, he reflected Miguel himself, strong, loyal, and determined. From the very beginning, the horse proved to be faithful to his owner, accompanying him in all the tasks around the farm. Miguel often spoke to him in a low voice while he worked, sharing, in his simple words, thoughts and feelings that few knew. Even without responding, Valente seemed to listen attentively, like a silent friend, ready to comfort Miguel with just his presence. Over the years, Valente demonstrated loyalty on several occasions, but one instance, in particular, was etched in everyone's memory. Miguel was working alone in a more distant part of the land when he had an accident. A tree trunk rolled, crushing his leg and leaving him unable to move. With no one to help him, he had no choice but to wait. It was Valente, sensing his owner's absence, who found him and stayed by his side, refusing to leave until Miguel, struggling, managed to grab onto the horse's mane, and he guided him back home, practically saving his life. To Miguel, Valente was more than just a horse. He was a true friend who showed in every gesture his gratitude and affection for the one who had always cared for him so lovingly. However, life is often relentless, and despite the deep bond between them, Miguel was forced to sell him. The decision to part with Valente was undoubtedly the hardest of his life. He knew that the new owner, Mr. Vicente, would not treat him with the same respect, but Miguel needed the money to save the farm. Valente left, and along with him, a part of Miguel seemed to go away as well. For him, that separation felt like an open wound that would never heal. After the horse was gone, Miguel became more reserved, as if a shadow had settled on his face. He rarely mentioned Valente's name, but everyone could see the longing he carried. As they remembered Valente during the funeral, those present felt that, in some way, that horse was part of Miguel's soul. They wondered if the separation and the way the horse had been treated after the sale contributed to the melancholy that dominated the farmer's last years. The memory of Valente was a symbol of something lost, a piece of Miguel that had never been recovered. Miguel's funeral was nearing its end, and everyone was preparing to say their goodbyes. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with a silent mourning that seemed to envelop everyone. However, as the attendees gathered around the grave for one last farewell, an unusual sound began to echo through the cemetery. Initially, it seemed distant, as if coming from the hills, but soon it became unmistakable, the sound of hooves galloping. People exchanged confused glances, trying to locate the source of the galloping. For those who knew Miguel and his relationship with Valente, the sound brought a mix of astonishment and an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Some murmured that it was just the echo of a lost horse nearby, while others, more sensitive, looked around anxiously, unsure of what to expect. But the sound did not fade. On the contrary, it seemed to grow closer. The gallops were strong and rhythmic, as if the horse were determined to reach something or someone. Those with their backs to the field beside the cemetery turned around, trying to identify the figure approaching through the mist. As the sound intensified, the attendees recoiled, startled, until finally a figure emerged in the distance. Through the fog, a dark-coated horse began to materialize, moving with an imposing and solemn presence. The brightness of its eyes, despite the distance, was intense and mysterious, as if carrying a message. Many there immediately recognized the figure of the horse. It was identical to Valente. The resemblance was striking, causing a mix of admiration and astonishment among the attendees. Valente, or what seemed to be him, continued to approach, as if drawn to the spot where Miguel was being buried. The strange sight caused unease among the guests, and the murmurs grew as the horse slowly advanced toward the group. Some began to whisper to each other, questioning whether this horse could be a sign, a visit to accompany Miguel on his final journey. When the horse finally reached the edge of the cemetery, it stopped, gazing at the small crowd with a firm and enigmatic look. It was as if it were waiting, observing each person present, evaluating their reactions, and absorbing the sorrow that filled the air. The intensity of the moment felt almost supernatural, as if something deeper were happening beyond anyone's comprehension. No one dared to move or interrupt the tense silence that dominated the atmosphere. The horse silently regarded everyone, as if each person there was being assessed, measured by what they knew about Miguel and what had happened to Valente after the sale. In absolute silence, the horse remained still, waiting for a resolution to this somber gathering, as if its presence represented something that still needed to be resolved. The mystery hung in the air, and the feeling that this moment would reveal something extraordinary was almost palpable. The presence of the horse in the cemetery brought a wave of murmurs and unrest. People began to gather, drawn by the mystery surrounding the animal, while the image of Miguel, with his gentle and sad gaze, lingered in everyone's memories. Valente, as he was called, seemed to transcend death, symbolizing something greater than the simple bonds between man and animal. He was now a link between the past and the present, and his arrival carried a message that many were beginning to sense. As the minutes passed, everyone's attention was focused on Valente, who kept his gaze fixed on Miguel's grave. This scene evoked a feeling of loss, but also of hope. For those who knew Miguel, the possibility that he was not truly alone on his final journey was a relief. However, the horse's presence also raised questions that remained unanswered. As the crowd watched, a familiar figure began to approach slowly. It was Rosa, Miguel's sister, who had always shared a love for the farm and its animals. Despair and longing were visible on her face, but there was also a determination that did not go unnoticed. She had brought some wildflowers with her to honor her brother. Upon seeing Valente, a mix of surprise and recognition lit up her gaze. She knew how much Miguel loved that horse and how deeply his departure had hurt him. Rosa stopped in front of the horse, which regarded her with an intense look. At that moment, something magical happened. Valente took a step forward, lowering his head in a gesture that seemed to signify a greeting. Rosa felt a chill run down her spine, yet at the same time, a wave of warmth enveloped her. It was as if the horse were acknowledging its connection to Miguel, and by extension, to her. Valente's presence was not merely an echo of the past, but a call to action. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what Rosa would do next. Her gaze turned toward the horse, and without thinking, she began to recount stories about Miguel and his adventures with Valente. As she spoke, the attendees drew closer, as if gathering around a campfire, eager to hear the memories she shared. Each word seemed to breathe life into images from the past, revealing the deep love and connection between Miguel and his horse. Rosa mentioned the day Miguel had to sell Valente, describing the pain they both felt at that moment. The story touched everyone's hearts, reviving the memory of how Miguel's life had changed after the separation. She spoke of the sadness that hung over the farm and how Miguel had never been the same after losing his faithful friend. With every tale, emotion overflowed, and the feeling that something still needed to be resolved grew stronger. In response to Rosa's narrative, Valente appeared to be increasingly present, as if absorbing every word, every feeling that arose in the air. It was as if the horse were in tune with the emotions of everyone present, reflecting the pain and longing felt there. The connection between Rosa and Valente became palpable, and a profound understanding began to form. The story of Miguel and Valente had not ended with the sale of the horse, but, in some way, continued to live on in the memories of those who loved Miguel. As Rosa shared her memories, a reverent silence settled over the crowd. The stories of Miguel and Valente sparked a deep emotional connection, prompting people to reflect on their own losses. However, a growing sense of urgency began to emerge, as if Valente was there not only to reminisce but also to seek justice for an untold story. Valente continued to watch Rosa intently, and in his gaze, there was an intensity that spoke of a mission to be fulfilled. The idea that Miguel's death might not have been merely a consequence of time and life, but also the result of others' actions began to take shape in Rosa's mind. The circumstances surrounding Valente's sale were murky and shrouded in secrets, and something within her urged her to investigate further. With renewed determination, Rosa resolved to uncover what had truly happened to Miguel after Valente was sold. That night, as the wind softly blew across the farm, she revisited her memories and conversations she had shared with her brother. Miguel had always talked about the financial troubles he faced, but had never gone into detail about how it affected his mental and emotional health. It was time to seek answers. The next morning, Rosa headed to Miguel's office, located in a secluded corner of the farm. The place was covered in dust, with yellowed papers strewn across the desk, reminding her of the times when Miguel dreamed of a prosperous future. Rosa began to sift through the documents, hoping to find clues that would help her understand the story surrounding Valente's sale. Among the papers, she found an old correspondence that caught her attention. It was a letter from a local banker, mentioning a loan Miguel had taken out, followed by subtle threats about the foreclosure of the property. As she read, a wave of anguish washed over her heart. It was evident that Miguel had become entangled in a risky game, and Valente had somehow become a tragic part of this story. Rosa also recalled a friend of Miguel, a man who had moved to the city but had always stayed nearby. He might have valuable information about the negotiations that took place during Valente's sale and Miguel's emotional state. With this idea in mind, Rosa prepared to seek him out, determined to uncover the truth behind the actions that led her brother to such deep pain. That same day, Rosa saddled her horse and rode toward the city.
Before we continue with this exciting story, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel and leave a like on this video to always stay up to date with new content.
Hoping the answers she sought would be waiting for her. The wind whipped against her face as she galloped, the sensation of freedom encouraging her to move forward. Deep down, a persistent thought accompanied her. Valente had returned for a reason, and Rosa was willing to discover what the past was trying to reveal to her. Upon arriving in the city, Rosa made her way to the small cafe where Miguel used to meet friends. The aroma of fresh coffee and the soft murmur of conversation brought an unexpected comfort. She spotted her friend Carlos sitting at a nearby table. As she approached, she felt her heart race. What she was about to discover could change everything. Rosa approached Carlos, her old friend, hoping he could shed light on the shadows of the past. Upon seeing her, Carlos broke into a smile, but his expression quickly turned into a mix of concern and curiosity. The connection between them was deep, marked by years of friendship and childhood memories on the farm. Rosa hesitated, searching for the right words to express the pain she felt from the loss of Miguel and the determination that had emerged within her. Despite the difficulties, she knew she needed to be clear about her intentions. The need to understand what had happened to Miguel after the sale of Valente consumed her. The conversation turned into a silent moment, where the weight of memories seemed to hang in the air. Carlos reflected on the circumstances surrounding Miguel before the sale of Valente. It was evident that he was aware of information he had not previously shared. Rosa, sensing her friend's hesitation, felt that something was being hidden. Carlos finally began to speak about the pressure Miguel faced. The mounting debts had created an agonizing environment, leading Miguel to make decisions that did not align with his character. The sale of Valente was a quick solution to a growing problem, but he was uncomfortable with it. Rosa's friend had tried to help, but Miguel was determined to resolve everything on his own. As Rosa listened, anguish accumulated in her heart. Miguel had always been someone who believed in the strength of facing challenges without relying on others, but this approach had cost him dearly. The revelation about the financial pressure he faced made it clear that Miguel had become entangled in a complicated situation. Rosa's focus soon shifted to the figure of a banker, Mr. Almeida, who had been controlling Miguel's situation. The pressure exerted by Almeida had increased over time, and rumors indicated that he did not care about the consequences of his actions. Rosa's heart raced at the mention of the banker's name. That information could be the key to understanding the motivations behind the sale of Valente and, possibly, the justice she sought. Determination grew within her, fueled by the desire to confront Almeida. If he were responsible for what happened to Miguel, it was time to expose the truth. Carlos's warning about the risks of getting involved with someone so powerful echoed in her mind, but Rosa's resolve did not waver. She felt that if she did not fight now, she would never find peace. Valente, like Miguel, deserved justice. With a renewed focus, Rosa decided she would not allow fear to paralyze her. Valente had returned to guide her, and Miguel also deserved to have his story heard. The thought of confronting Almeida seemed daunting, but the urgency to do the right thing outweighed her fears. With strength and resolve, Rosa and Carlos stood up, ready to face the challenges ahead. Rosa was aware that she was about to enter dangerous territory, but she also felt that the truth was finally within her reach. With Valente as her guide and Carlos as her ally, she prepared to seek justice, determined to uncover the connection between her brother and the banker, as well as the true story of Valente. Rosa and Carlos prepared for what was to come. The determination that burned within Rosa drove her forward, but a cloud of uncertainty hovered over the mission they were about to undertake. Banker Almeida was a feared and respected figure in the city, his influence extending into many aspects of local life. Confronting him was an act of courage, but it was also a venture filled with risks. Their search for Almeida led them to an elegant office building in the city center, a place that exuded power and opulence. As they walked through the entrance, Rosa felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Each step brought her closer to the truth she so desperately sought, but it also exposed her to a dangerous world where personal interests often took precedence over ethics. The lobby was vast, adorned with works of art and luxurious decor that symbolized the wealth amassed by the banker. The contrast with Miguel's situation and the sale of Valente was palpable and painful. Rosa took a deep breath, determined not to let fear overwhelm her. Carlos, by her side, offered an encouraging glance, aware of the significance of this moment. After checking in at the reception, they were directed to Almeida's office. The corridor felt endless, each step echoing in their ears as a reminder of what was at stake. Finally, they reached the door of the office, where a gleaming plaque displayed the banker's name. Rosa hesitated for a brief moment, her mind filled with questions about what could happen next. Upon opening the door, Rosa entered an imposing space decorated with dark wood furniture and large windows that offered a view of the city. In the center of the room, Almeida sat behind a massive desk, reviewing documents. His presence was intimidating, and Rosa felt a wave of nerves, but she maintained a firm posture. Carlos stood beside her, silent but supportive. Almeida raised his eyes, a confident smile forming on his face as he saw them. He was a middle-aged man with a penetrating gaze and an air of superiority that seemed to envelop him. Rosa felt the tension in the air as he assessed them, as if weighing their intentions. She knew that the banker was not known for his generosity, and the stories about his financial practices were far from favorable. Rosa began to express her concerns, talking about the sale of Valente and the pressure Miguel faced. As she narrated her version of events, Almeida's expression remained impassive, although the atmosphere grew heavier with each word that left her lips. He seemed to listen, but the look in his eyes revealed that he had no intention of committing to anything that could tarnish his reputation. His response was cold and calculated. Almeida denied any involvement in Miguel's financial difficulties and attempted to distort the narrative, claiming that Rosa's brother was responsible for his own choices. Rosa felt a wave of frustration, realizing she was dealing with a skilled manipulator. The banker did not hesitate to use his power to protect himself, and Rosa understood that she needed more than words to confront him. The conversation became a chess game, where each move was carefully considered. Almeida tried to shift the focus, speaking about other business ventures and his successes, but Rosa was determined to keep control of the situation. Inside her, a fervent determination simmered, fueled by the memory of Miguel and the need for justice for Valente. After an intense exchange of arguments and accusations, Rosa finally decided to change tactics. She knew that Almeida was vulnerable to threats to his public image. With that in mind, she began to insinuate that there were people willing to expose his questionable practices. This immediately caught the banker's attention. Almeida's expression shifted, revealing a flicker of concern he had not shown before. He watched her, and the tension in the room escalated. Rosa realized she had reached a crucial point, and this encouraged her. The power Almeida held over many lives could be challenged, and the courage she felt in her heart propelled her to move forward. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and Almeida began to defend himself. The conversation, once dominated by him, was now in her hands. Rosa knew this could be her chance to turn the narrative around and seek the truth she so longed for. The determination of one man could be broken by the strength of a woman willing to fight for her rights and for the memory of a brother who, despite everything, did not deserve to be forgotten. The atmosphere in Almeida's office grew increasingly tense. Rosa, with her heart racing, was determined to uncover the truth. She knew that the banker had much to hide, and the sale of Valente was at the center of it all. Miguel's past, her deceased brother, and the horse he loved were the pieces of a puzzle that needed to be assembled. The initial conversation had only been a prelude. Now, she was about to dive deeper. Almeida, initially confident, began to show signs of unease. Rosa, noticing this, decided it was time to press him. She mentioned the rumors circulating about the negative impact his financial decisions had on vulnerable people. The stories of others who had been harmed by Almeida's unchecked ambition began to fill the room. He tried to ignore the insinuations, but Rosa knew that each word was like a drop of water on a stone. The pressure was building. She reminded him that Almeida had become involved in a series of risky transactions and that some of his former business partners were distancing themselves. That information, a recent discovery in her investigation, seemed to cause discomfort. Rosa was certain that Almeida would realize she was not just a young woman seeking answers, but someone determined to expose the truth. With a steady gaze fixed on the banker, Rosa began to describe the emotional impact that Valente's sale had on Miguel's life. She spoke of the pain he felt in giving up the horse, the frustration of being forced to choose between his passion and the need to survive. Rosa's determination to defend her brother's legacy shone through in every word. Almeida, growing increasingly nervous, began to shift away from his defensive posture, revealing a vulnerability Rosa had not expected. She then mentioned a secret meeting in which Almeida had allegedly participated, an event where dirty business was discussed. It was information that Rosa had painstakingly gathered and now seemed to be the key to destabilizing him. The banker, realizing that the conversation was taking an unexpected turn, hesitated. His gaze sharpened, as if he were weighing the consequences of every word. The tension in the room was almost palpable. Rosa knew she was one step away from discovering something significant. With a touch of boldness, she suggested that Almeida was not just a businessman, but someone who manipulated the people around him to achieve his goals. The statement caught him off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless. Rosa felt she had found a crack in Almeida's armor and was determined to exploit it. He began to close off again, but Rosa was not willing to give up. Her mission was to find the truth about Miguel and Valente, and nothing could divert her focus. So, with controlled calmness, she asked a direct question. How would he feel if he were in Miguel's position, having to give up what he loved most? That question hit him hard. Almeida looked away, as if he were internally wrestling with his emotions. Silence stretched in the room, and Rosa realized she had control of the situation. Almeida, a man who had once been so authoritative, was now visibly uncomfortable. The pressure of the conversation made him reflect on his actions and the consequences they had brought to Miguel's life. Rosa, sensing the shift, continued to weave her narrative. The pain of losing Valente was not just about a horse. It was about loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bonds that existed between a man and his friend. Gradually, Almeida began to open up, albeit reluctantly. He admitted that he had not forced Miguel to sell Valente, but that, in some way, he had failed to help his friend in times of need. Guilt began to show in his words, and Rosa realized she was making progress. Each sentence he uttered seemed to lighten the burden she carried, as if the truth was unfolding before her. Under pressure from his emotions, Almeida mentioned that he had helped Miguel in other situations, but he also revealed that his own ambition had contributed to the sale of the horse. The internal struggle he was facing was evident, and Rosa saw there an opportunity to guide him toward redemption. She knew that the truth needed to be exposed, and Almeida was beginning to understand the role he had played in the tragedy of Miguel's life. Finally, Rosa proposed that Almeida use his influence to make amends for what he had caused. He could help restore Miguel's farm and, in doing so, make peace with his past. Almeida hesitated, but the idea that he could do something positive seemed to resonate with him. Rosa's gaze was firm, and she felt she was just a few steps away from achieving what she wanted. The conversation was heading toward its climax, and Rosa knew that the words that followed could change the course of the lives involved. Almeida could not change the past, but there was a chance he could do what was right. The responsibility for his actions was becoming clear, and the possibility of a new beginning hung in the air. As Rosa left Almeida's office, she felt that the truth had been revealed, and the weight of past injustices was beginning to dissipate. The ghost of Valente might still be lurking, but now there was a new purpose. The fight for justice and for Miguel's memory was not just a personal mission, but a call for all who had suffered under the shadows of unchecked ambition. With a renewed heart and the determination to fight for what was right, Rosa walked toward the future. She knew there was still much to be done, but she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The legacy of Miguel and Valente needed to be honored, and she was willing to fight for it, becoming the voice for those who could no longer defend themselves.
Thanks for watching until the end. What did you think of today's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Until next time.